Hi, welcome to Doorway to the Word. Well, today we continue the book of Job, episode 2, the Prologue, part 1. Who is Job? Well, it's a good place to start to find out about the main character, man Job. Well, first of all, where does he come from? Well, in chapter 1, very first verse, it says, "In the land of Uz there lived a man whose name was Job." Well, Job was from a place called Uz. The question is, where is Uz? Well, there are two possibilities the scholars came up about the location of Uz. One is a place called Aram, and another one is a place called Edom. Well, Aram situated north of Israel, and this Aram is named after a man called Uz, the son of Aram, the son of Shem. You can read that in Genesis 10 verse 23, chapter 22 verse 21, and 1 Chronicle chapter 1 verse 42. And from one of the Dead Sea Scroll, in the Dead Sea, they found many scrolls containing the Old Testament scriptures and so on. And one of them are called War Scroll, and it mentions the land of Uz was located beyond the Euphrates, and which is the land of Aram. So that's why some scholars say this land of Uz was actually in nation of Aram. Well, another theory was in Edom, which is situated in the south of Israel. In Lamentation, the book of Lamentation in the Bible, chapter 4, verse 21, actually mentions like this: "Rejoice and be glad, O daughter of Edom, you who dwell in the land of Uz." So scripture tells us the land of Uz is in Edom. So those are the two major possibilities, one in the north and one in the south. Well, yet again, some other scholars actually suggest that the Uz was possibly the land that covers both Aram and Edom. So it was entire land right on the east side of Israel. That's some people would say. Yet that there was another theory which is quite interesting. It says the land of Uz may not be the actual physical location, country or city, but it was set as the conceptual location for the story. And they drew this theory from this Hebrew word, Uz. Actually, there's a word in the Hebrew language, which is Uz. It means counsel or the advice. That implies the story takes place in a land of counsel or land of advice. And that's obviously where the Job was counseled or advised by his friend, and ultimately by God. That's why some people say when he said Job was from land of Uz, he was from land of counsel, and the story is about those advices and counsel from all those people. And in this case, Job could be an Israelite. In the earlier case, Aram and Edom, if that's the locations, the actual Job wouldn't be an Israelite, but could be the Gentile. But anyway, that's where he's from. Job is actually credited as blameless, upright, righteous, fear God, and shun evil from the very beginning of the book. He was also extremely wealthy and rich, and he was blessed in every way, including having many children. And it makes sense that if he was a king of Edom, as the Septuagint claims, or the Job could be a wealthy merchant, or even closely related to all the monarchs and kings of the areas. You see, in the ancient time in the Near East, especially during the period of Old Babylonian and Old Assyrian period, which is around about 20th century BC, where the story was set. All these times around the area, there are many city-states. The actual big nations empire weren't existed yet at that point, but there were many city-states governed by or ruled by the kings and queens and governors and all those people. And actual trade industry was owned by those royals, owned by kings, and controlled by those kings, rather than individual traders conducting the business. So therefore, if the Job was a wealthy trader, there's a possibility that the Job was a royal trader or even a government officials dealing with a trade. If, of course, he wasn't the king himself. He is the royal trader, or at least he's got very high status. And the evidence of that, his wealth and high status in society, was actually in this story. If you jump to the chapter 29, you can actually read Job was reminiscing the life he had before the suffering, before he lost everything. And it describes how his life was like. Well, let's have a look. Chapter 29, verse 6, it says, "When my path was drenched with cream and the rock poured out for me, the stream of olive oil." You see in the Bible that milk, cream, milk and honey, the milk and cream, the milk and oil, they all represent the blessing and the prosperity. That indicates that Job was a very wealthy man, because his path, the path of life was drenched with milk, the cream. And also he said the rocks that poured out the stream of olive oil. Olive oil, as I said, it represents the wealth, the prosperity. And it came from a rock, not from the olive trees. It indicates that his prosperity and blessing was given to him, or came to him divinely, miraculously. In verse 7, it tells us that he had a seat in the public square by the city gate. You see, this indicates he lived in a big city. City with a gate. It means the city walls. And I tell you, around that time, somewhere like the city of Nineveh, the Babylon, they're all well known for the city walls, and they had many gates. So therefore, Job was not from a small village or town. He was from big city, and he had a seat specially made for him to sit in the public. So only prominent and important person gets a seat in the public square in the city. You see, only the nobleman was treated like this. And verse 8 until verse 11 tells us the young man stepped aside when he walked into the city, and the old man rose to their feet, and chiefs refrained from speaking, and nobles shut their mouth. See, Job was well respected by all range of people, and he was commended and accepted as a great person by everybody. In verse 12, it says that he rescued the poor people, the fatherless people. He was a charitable man, a very generous man, and he involved deeply in the people's lives, and people actually relied on him. He had wealth and power. That's why he was in a position to provide to those poor people. Around that time, most people, the ordinary people, the common people, didn't have that kind of wealth. They were too busy to look after themselves to meet their everyday need. They did not have a surplus wealth to give out to poor people, unfortunate people, disadvantaged people. But Job did. That indicates Job was a very wealthy man, and he had a good heart and compassion to all those people. He was a man of justice. He had an authority and a power and means to protect people. You can read that from verse 17 in chapter 29 and continues in verse 21 and 23. People actually listened and valued Job's opinions. And verse 24 and 25 tells us he sat as a chief and dwelt as a king and comforted mourners. See, he was taking the leadership position in this big city society. See, from this chapter 29, that we can identify Job was a prominent citizen of a large city with a great wealth and power. He was compassionate, generous, and benefactor of many, and very much respected by everybody. Of course, in a following chapter that he tells after he lost everything, that turned 180 degrees, and everybody deserted him and ridiculed him. But he was that kind of person. And he was a high class and possibly ruling class, or at least had a great influence of the governing of the city. Therefore, we can draw the assumption that Job was either a king of a city-state, or city governor, or the very important wealthy royal merchant. This leads us to the assumption about his three friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, could also be a wealthy people in a high position of the society to be friend with such an important man Job. Also, in chapter 1, it tells us Job had many children, and it seemed like his children, were not quite as righteous as their father, because they indulged in such a kind of luxurious lifestyle. The Bible tells us, the story tells us, they had a party every time one of them had a birthday, and they had 10 of them, at least 7 sons. They had a birthday and invited everybody. Well, that around the time that the land of Uz was a pagan society, the most likely those parties were done in the name of the pagan gods, as it was a custom of around that time. Every city had their own deity, and most likely those were held in the name of those pagan gods. And that's what Job was worried about, that his sons and daughters are maybe sinning and being unrighteous towards God. That's why Job brought burnt sacrifice to God to intercede for his children. I'd like to mention something about this burnt offering here. Now, some people might think burnt offering was to ask God to protect his children. But actually, burnt offerings are not for the purpose. It's not the magic spell to twist God's arms, or did something to make a deal with God. Burnt offerings actually is for the demonstration of the humility, the humble heart, a humble attitude towards God. So Job went there with humble heart by bringing showing a humble heart towards God by bringing the burnt offering, and then pray to God to protect the children. But unfortunately, we will find out that this burnt offering didn't work. Job's children died, and Again, this is a very, very fundamental, heavy question. Why didn't God hear Job's prayer? Again, this is a part of the theme of this book. Why does the innocent suffer? Why does the righteous God didn't bring justice then? Well, as we go through this book of Job, in the following episodes, we will actually find out the answer, or at least close to the answer to the question, why does the innocent suffer? Well, if you would like to find out, please stick to this series, in the door to word, and let's find out the heart of God. Well, in the next episode, we will see how Job's suffering came about. But until then, God bless. Goodbye.